Hey there, Jen here. I was just contemplating whether or not I would need a ring light, and looks like we're okay with that one. Sweet. Well, I decided my sinuses are probably going to bother me no matter what I do today, so I figured why not go ahead and do this now. It'd be fun to research anyway, and it's a video I wanted to stream anyway. Funny thing, while I set this up and bring things up to share with you guys, and make sure that everything is streaming. So I got a headache because yesterday I had forgotten that I had put, it was just a mini one too, a mini hair clip on the bottom of a t-shirt. And I put it on there, not thinking, and later on I kind of tossed it down because I change sweaters and stuff sometimes as I walk the dog, because this is Ohio and the weather changes every 10 minutes. So I sat the t-shirt down and the little girl got on it and I was like, hey, give me that. Don't sit on that. It's still clean. I'll put it back on after I get back from walk. And I went to fluff it so I could fold it. And I caught myself, after doing all those videos about the Black Eye Club, I caught myself in the right eye with this clip, hard. And it just took me to my knees, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this has been a terrible week for hurting myself. So, although I did have quite the miracle after dropping that 20-pound weight on my foot. But yeah, it's been a little rough. So let me pull this up to share with you guys. I think we're going to start, we'll start with a basic Google search. I just want to show you what came up. And then, funny thing, when I was doing the last video and I talked about the dancing plague, I on this saint. But we know that our search engines kind of personalize themselves to us, and maybe they get used to what we're searching for or looking for and give us the answers that we seek. But this is also why I tell you not to trust everything that you pull up online, because it could be wrong. Somebody could have been misinformed. They could be misinforming you. You just don't know. So, as always, take all this with a grain of salt. So let's jump right into it. Now, Saint Vitus is, as we learned in the last video, he is the patron saint of the dancing plague, which they actually gave a technical, scientific terminology for it. Now, looking back throughout history, nowadays, we will say, well, we know more. We know more about science now. We're more practiced, we're more civilized, we're more, society has come so far, we've progressed so far, that everything back then was just superstition. But I would argue that it seems like, to me, we were smarter, we had more skill sets. If you just look at the architecture and the fact that we all farmed and sustained ourselves, I would say we've rather declined, but I don't think that decline is necessarily permanent. And I think we are having a spiritual awakening at this time. And so, kind of like fishing, what I'm trying to do is just to bring in as many people as I can to the awareness of the fact that there is a supernatural world around us that we cannot see with our physical eyes, and that we should walk through this learning about that together and how to operate. And so I found this saint to be quite fascinating because, again, when doctors first came on the scene, religious people would call them witch doctors. They would call them practitioners of witchcraft, and certain what we call medicines today are known as pharmakia, which is a form of witchcraft. And almost all of America is on some type of medication. I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving that type of advice. I'm not telling you to get rid of all of your medication, because I think that would be dangerous too. We have to give ourselves some grace and recognize, okay, that we were raised in this society in this time. And this is where we have to build our discernment. And in looking at stories like this, we can definitely take away lessons of that day and of today. So Saint Vitus, while he is attributed to that plague, let's dive in deeper and find out why he is the patron saint of dance, and more specifically of the dancing plague. So he was a young martyred Christian in the 4th century Sicily. It is important to understand that not all martyrs are martyred unto death. A martyr is anyone who is persecuted, for their faith or an ideology, for their belief system, okay? Even sometimes if it's wrong. And people will often say, well, these people wouldn't have died for a lie. No, but again, when you're deceived, you don't know you're deceived. And I'm not doing away with the Bible or the saints or anything like that by saying that. Again, it's approaching things with no preconceived notions, right? We know that there's a few different sides to this, a few different angles of looking at these things. So he was known for his miraculous healing and refusal to renounce his faith under Emperor Diocletian. After escaping his pagan father with his nurse and tutor, he performed a miracle by casting a demon out of the emperor's son, but was then tortured alongside his companions. According to legend, he endured incredible torments, including boiling oil and lions, but emerged unharmed. St. Vitus is now a patron of dancers, actors, and those with nervous disorders like St. Vitus dance, and is invoked against storms and fires. So that's a good thing to know if you're someone who is not against asking for the intercession of the saints. And again, you're not worshiping them and you're not asking them to materialize in front of you. You're just saying, hey, I know you're still alive somewhere out there. Pray for me, intercede for me if you can, because they see more than we do, if that makes sense. And I actually caught on to something. I've been wondering about demons and frequencies, and I've been wondering if they can only hear us, but they cannot see us. I'm starting to see how that might play into some things and make things make sense. So I thought that was an interesting, that's something I might dig into deeper on my own. And I just wanted to see what you guys might, have thought of that. So his early life and conversion, he was born in Sicily around 290 AD. Now, I thought this was fascinating too. He was the son of a pagan Roman senator, and oftentimes, excuse me, sinuses still, you will see that people of high status, people that you would not think, people who would be cast out from their own family sometimes, the Medicis, God will bless people with wealth, right? But oftentimes, if you're already wealthy, He will convert you, He will bring you over. Because to start out as a believer and then become wealthy, I think that's dangerous. You rarely see that work out well. So if it's the true God, I see Him changing the wealthy, and I think it's fascinating that so many from the higher echelon of Roman society eventually did convert to Christianity, to Catholicism. And all Catholicism meant then was universal church. It was the only church of Christ at that time. So it says he was converted to the Christian faith through the influence of his nurse, which I thought was interesting too. Her name is rather heavenly. It is Crescentia, or like a crescent moon. Crescentia, and his tutor Modestus. So he had people who were raising him, who had an influence on him, and they were not his parents. He had people in his life because he was wealthy, right? He had these other people looking after him who were a source of inspiration and motivation, but also they were a parental role because, if you are a wealthy family, especially back then, you didn't spend a lot of time with your parents. You were raised by the staff. It says his persecution and miracle. His father tried to force him to abandon Christianity, but Vitus steadfastly refused. He fled with his nurse and tutor to southern Italy to escape his father's attempts to make him renounce his faith. And how hard that must be. And so many of us are going through estrangement from our children at this time, or broken homes, how we were raised in broken families now. You do see these things, they have a cycle. They are cyclical. And, if we can, it's a good idea to try and break these cycles. Miracle at the imperial court. It says his healing powers were legendary, and he was summoned before Emperor Diocletian to heal the emperor's son, who suffered from a demonic possession. Vitus succeeded, but Diocletian demanded he worship the Roman gods, even after he cured his son. That's wild. Martyrdom and torture, enduring torment. Vitus and his companions, Modestus and Crescentia, were then subjected to cruel tortures, including, oh my gosh, being thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil and facing wild beasts. It's so wild how, and again, you see these twin aspects of everything, these binary aspects of everything, because you have Christ and then you have Satan, who are both referred to as the Son of God, and one who went dark and one who went light. And then you have lions, which sometimes are used as the beasts of the field and a thing to be afraid of. And then Christ is the Lion of Judah, right? That is their symbol, and that is a tribe, the tribe of Judah, and one of God's tribe of his children. So you see this all throughout. It's almost like everybody has some evil doppelganger, your own personal Satan to contend with. And speaking of that, we're actually going to look at that. I found an interesting doctrine in Mormon theology, and so we're going to take a look at that too in the future, God willing. He did have angelic intervention. It says, legend states that angels saved them from these torments and brought them back to safety, where they eventually died a gentle death from their suffering around 303 AD. Patron of dancers, St. Vitus became the patron saint of dancers because in the late Middle Ages, people danced. Let me make sure everything is working. Oh, it was working. Let me double check. Is it not sharing? What's happening? I'm seeing it, but I'm not seeing it when I try to pull it up, of course. Hold on. Let me just... Okay, it is up. Thank goodness. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to something I pulled up, something else I found. Let's start here. Share this tab. Now, I found a really nice bibliography on him, a very nice link, and oddly enough, it's on a brewery site, a brewery website, and so we'll take a look at that in a second. Sorry, my sinuses are getting me. Excuse me. St. Vitus, the iconography. Iconography is like the artwork or the relics left behind. Some people call them idols. Again, that's the part, like I do believe that they were wiser before us, but not Old Testament wise. I believe like our recent history. But we have to understand not to go too far to either angle, right? I know that I have, what do I have here? I have this mug that my dad left me. I love it. I call him Jacques, Frenchman, right? And it holds my like markers and Sharpies and my scissors. Some people would call that an idol, but I'm saying it's just a decoration that's also has a practical purpose. And my intent is to use that as a practical thing. I am not worshiping it and talking to it and thinking that it actually houses life. This is why I don't really like the theology that demons can attach to objects. I think that, yeah, you can have like a residual thing, and demons are dead, so they're not alive. But I attributing some type of animation or life to an inanimate object, I just have always found that a little strange. So forgive me for that. And I know I'm the girl who said, what if these statues one day come to life? We're seeing these stories like Medusa and Jason and the Argonauts and Noah in the days of Noah with all the genetic manipulation. We're seeing more and more that certain things of that aspect can be true. But again, balance is needed. So iconography means like the statues that you see here or the pictures. Orthodox iconography, I really like. It's very plain, almost plain, but it's still, if you're meditating or praying, it will still keep your mind focused on Christ. That's kind of why we have the dove for the Holy Spirit And that's an icon that sometimes we will look, we're not worshiping it. We are looking at it to take our mind to that place of spirituality when we're praying, to forget the day, forget the bills, forget the family even, and just focus on God. And images can help us do that because we live in a reality that is nothing but symbols. Everything is a symbol, right? I am not this body. It's a symbol for the spirit within, but I am not just this body. So these are St. Vitus's, the iconography. It says this is at the river Siler in Lucania, the natal day of the holy martyrs Vitus Modestus and Crescentia. They went there during the reign of the Emperor Diocletian. Through the power of God, they endured a vat of hot lead, beasts, and the rack. Oh, God, help them. They ran the race of glory successfully because they never renounced God. St. Vitus was a Sicilian boy of 7. Okay, so here's the other thing. And this is why I start out. The beginning of the video will always be an introduction and like a Google search or something. It will give us the bare bones. And then we get into the meat of what is going on here, his actual life. And then as we do an outro, we'll also look at something else we'll look at in the next video or try to tie up this subject. So just so you guys know, there is a method to the madness. So it says he was 7 when he embraced Christianity. Can you imagine being 7 years old and standing up to your folks about anything, especially if you were Gen X and before? Like you didn't do it. You just weren't allowed to do it. So I think that's wild. And this is what I talk about when we're being brought up and we are told not to tell our elders no. We can do more harm than good with our children, thinking we're doing good. But we're doing, oftentimes in our life, we're doing what somebody else has told us to do. And children are very good about, because they come, and I think it's because they're closer to the spirit realm than adults. Adults are kind of in the middle. We're not really that close to death yet. We're not as close to our birth as we once were. Children have just come out of that, right? And everything is fresh and new. And usually your first perception of something is the correct one. This is why I ask people to come into my videos with no preconceived notions about Catholicism, about women, about men, about anything. And let's learn together and try to shed some of the things that are superstitious foolishness, and then maybe re-embrace some of the tradition that protected us and kept us happy, healthy, and full of joy in our lives. Okay, so enough of that. Let's continue. It says he stood up to his father. He was 7 years old, right, during the reign of Diocletian, and performed numerous miracles and conversions. However, that drew the attention of the governor Valerian, which is interesting because there's an herb called valerian, and it will help you sleep. And allegedly, according to lore, certain beings are allergic to it, who persecuted Vitus, even though the boy had cured his withered arm. So an angel guided him to Lucania, I think, in Italy, along with his tutor Modestus and his nurse Crescentia. The Emperor Diocletian then summoned him to Rome to help his son, who was possessed by a devil. At Vitus's, and think you have to put yourself in that time frame. You didn't call a doctor, you called a holy man. And oftentimes the holy man was also the distributor of medicine, if there were a physical medicine given. But sometimes all that was required was simple prayer and fasting. And we know this growing up. We were told to starve a cold and feed the flu, one of the two. But one of them you starve to get rid of it, to get better, you stop feeding it. So this is where all those things come from in our past and in our history that now we call superstition, but are we actually any better off for it? And I want to hear your answers and what you think about that. So here we get into the meat of it. The Emperor Diocletian then summoned him to Rome to help his son, who was possessed by a devil. At Vitus's prayer, the devil was driven out, but that did not stop Diocletian from ordering Vitus. So now imagine this. He's like a 7-year-old child, around 10 or 12 at this point, and he's still a child, and he's holy, right? He's probably a virgin, so he's pure. I don't know what he eats yet, but I do have a feeling that in the Daniel, in the when he was in the fire, when Daniel was in the fire, that the lions did not see him as an enemy because he did not have anything of animal products in his body. And think about it, he fasted first before all that happened. And this was how he ate normally. So I do think that has a lot to do with things, and people will ridicule me for that, but let's read on and see if we can find out anything more. But that's probably why a prayer from this child would do more than, say, maybe of a holy man, because this child is sinless at this point. Probably he's probably very pure and holy. So it said, at his prayer the devil was driven out, but that did not stop Diocletian from ordering Vitus to be tortured into worshiping the gods. The boy and his companions were imprisoned, squeezed under heavy iron weights, exposed to lions, and put into a vat of molten lead. Finally they died after being stretched on the rack. I was going to say that humans are we are so cruel. But humans are easily led. I don't believe that humanity would come up with these ideas on its own. Like, I just don't. And I do believe that that wickedness that came in was from the fallen. And with everybody having mixed blood at this point, like, only God can save us at this point. But we got to try and cooperate with that. And we have to try and love people to the cross. That's what's been kind of impressed upon me recently. And so, yeah. And I know that sometimes I can look at the demonic sometimes a little too much. It's good to be aware, but we want our focus to be on the good things of life. This life is still good. Viewed through the media, no, it's not good. But that's the media. That's a false eye. It's going to show you everything that's wicked and wrong with the world before it will show you anything good. The goal is to get us cursing ourselves and cursing God. Yeah. And I find it interesting that they're always doing this to children. It's always children. They're always attacking the most pure and the most holy and the most vulnerable of our society, which is usually children and the houseless. I was going to say elderly, but I've met some wicked elderly people in the last few years. So I'm going to be careful about that. I love my old folks, but okay, so it says St. Vitus is customarily pictured as a youth with curly blonde hair. He saved himself from the lions and the molten lead by making the sign of the cross. So in some images, he holds a cross. In San Vito lo Capo, the town named for him in Sicily, the attribute in his images is a dog or a pair of dogs. That's interesting. So many of us love our pets, our furry companions. As in the first picture at the right, there's also a dog in his portrait in a church in Rome. In the 17th century, the historian Rocco Piri noted that in San Vito lo Capo, the saint was invoked for protection against the bite of rabid dogs. To this day, a spring with healing waters is maintained beneath his church, where Piri says the saint saved a boy that a dog had bitten and left his teeth in his arm. So these are his icons. They're the church that we were just reading about. Look how old, and look at the masonry. Now, masonry is different from the club, and it just is. We should be skilled. We should be crafters. We should be artisans. We should be bartering our skill sets and our services with each other. Because look how long these things last, too. It's not like our plastic vinyl houses. So here's a bust of him. I'll go down a little further. There's a statue with his cross. Very young man. What a shame. And this is actually his coat of arms. They don't do the dog in the coat of arms, but there's the boiling cauldron. And again, you have that imagery of witches, right? What do witches do? What did they try to do to Bugs Bunny in all of the cartoons? Put him in a cauldron and cook him, right? And Hansel and Gretel. And so here you have another child being boiled alive. There's something to that. If it's, we keep picking up this same thread of truth that's in a lot of different things. Okay, so now we're going to go to, I have another page from this same website, but I want to skip to something that's a little more cohesive, because You'll see what I mean when we get there. This isn't going to be super long, but I thought it would be fascinating to find out why he's called the plague, or the saint of the dancing plague. And as well, they make him look older on this, like this icon of him that comes up on Wikipedia too. He always looks older. Okay. So this is the story of Saint Vitus, and this is awesome because I found this on why Stefan, why Stefan, Eh, it's a brewery site, a German one apparently. But it has the most cohesive and well written bibliography that I found. Okay, so this is him. It says, find out about St. Vitus' story. It is unique and closely connected to Freising. According to legend, St. Vitus was born as the son of a Roman senator at the time of Emperor Diocletian, circa 312, in Mazzara, Sicily, brought up by a wet nurse and raised in the Christian faith by his tutor Modestus. So this is his teacher and his mentor. As a child, he performed miracles and was therefore beaten by his father. Brought before the court, he refused to renounce his faith and was beaten again, causing the judges' and henchmen's arms to wither. That's an interesting piece of the legend, no? We are told in Scripture, touch not God's anointed. Everyone who causes harm to one that God anoints, bad things are in store for. And that doesn't even mean sainthood. These are not perfect people oftentimes. Most saints, adult saints, have come through sinning. And we're going to do a video on that too, where the belief of salvation is through sin. And I don't advise anyone to do it. But the idea is to give people hope. No matter what life you've led, you can change what's ahead. So it says St. Vitus' story is a tough one. His father sought to end him. His wet nurse and tutor fled with him to Lucania. I don't know. Hold on. Hold, please. I think it's Lucania. An eagle provided the fugitives with bread. Look at that. God is always feeding his people. They were discovered and taken to Emperor Diocletian. Even though Vitus healed the emperor's possessed son, for his troubles, he was thrown into prison for refusing, however, to make sacrifices to the Roman gods. So after he healed him, knowing that he is praying to what he calls the one true God, right? The God of all these gods, the big boss man. And St. Vitus is bypassing all of them, which they didn't allow back then. There was none of that. And so for his trouble, his own father persecuted him. And then they wanted him, once he was called to Rome, they wanted him to make sacrifices even after healing his son. That's wild. Heavy iron plates were meant to crush him and his companions in vain. He was thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil, but emerged unharmed. A wild lion was set upon Vitus and his companions, but the animal tamely lay down at his feet. Interesting. He was tied to a torture rack, but lightning destroyed the instruments of torture. Angels saved him and his companions, bringing them to Lucania. Immersed in prayer, the martyrs died a gentle death. Now that is nice, knowing that after everything he went through, after being rejected by his own father, and trust me when I say I know that brand of poison, what it can do to a person. And so good for them that in the end they didn't suffer. It says veneration, which is not worship. Veneration of Vitus is documented early in the martyrology of Jerome. That's a mouthful. Pope Gelasius consecrated the first church to him, and his story of suffering was spread from Lucania to Upper Italy, France, and Germany around the year 600. Pope Gregory reported about monasteries in Sicily that bore his name. Abbot Fulrad acquired relics of the saint for his monastery in St. Denis, and Corvey Abbey became the center of Vitus veneration. But wait a second. Why is this one not mentioning the dance? Let's keep going. St. Vitus and his connection to freezing. Around the year 833, Bishop Hero of Freising founded a Benedictine monastery dedicated to St. Vitus. Halfway up, oh boy, Stephen Hill and the 1020 Bishop Eaglebert of Freising. Boy, you guys should listen just to hear me mispronounce this. I apologize if there's anyone German watching. It's not a language I'm accustomed to whatsoever. One of the city gates in Freising was also called the Vitus Gate. Okay, today's pharmacy. Wow, so they named a pharmacy after him. Do you see how this stuff is so convoluted still? Maybe pharmakia meant something different than we're being taught today. Again, the words, you have to really dig. In 1802, the churches were closed and the buildings demolished. The monastery's most famous provost was Rachwin, secretary to Bishop Otto of Freising, the famous historian who had documented the deeds of Emperor Friedrich Barbarossa. Okay, blah, blah, blah. The saint is normally depicted as a boy or youth, nobly dressed with curly hair, often wearing a cap or hat. He is the patron saint of Saxony and Bohemia. He sometimes wears an ermine cloak, probably because of like each area, just like Mother Mary, for wherever she's seen, like their culture adopts that vision, then they put her in whatever dress is customary for them. We have to learn to separate culture and faith. You should be able to bring your culture to your faith, right? They're two different things. Now it says, sometimes depictions make reference to his martyrdom, sitting unclothed in a cauldron, sometimes with a cockerel, lion, or eagle. He is also to be found in many city and municipal coat of arms. He counts as one of the 14 holy helpers. Interesting. Invoked for illnesses such as epilepsy, St. Vitus dance, rabies, and snake bites. He is also considered the patron saint of beer brewers, which is why he's on this brewery website. You're probably wondering, like, why? That's why. He's the patron saint of breweries. Brewers, vintners, pharmacists, and miners. That's interesting. His feast day is celebrated in the Catholic Church on June 15th, which is the longest day of the year, according to the Julian calendar. In connection with his feast day, there are also many proverbs, such as that of the brewers, St. Vitus, don't let it rain, so that we will lack no barley. Interesting. Because they say he is invoked against storms. But now that I have you here, let's go ahead and I'm going to Google his name along with dancing plague, because that didn't really tell us why they're attributing this to him. And I told you, when you, for some reason, I'm having a hard time finding why they associated the two. See, now this is a French website, which should know more because it started in France. What is with my people, man? For real. Only carting the victims off to the nearby St. Vitus. Okay, so let's show you guys this real quick. Because again, they don't mention it a lot. In his life, he had such a short life. The medieval dancing plague of St. Vitus dance. 500 years ago, during a hot July, in the French city of Strasbourg, a strange mania seized its people, which we also have to do a search into why these things keep happening on July 14th. Because a couple hundred years later on July 14th, you would have Bastille Day, the storming of the Bastille. So again, events are cyclical, dates seem to be cyclical, and I found something very strange the other day, and it was a coincidence. I just happened to be going about my day, and I noticed when there's patterns around me. And I heard of two people with the same name who passed away in the same way. So I thought that was interesting too. These patterns, and I think things like this are what make people think it's a simulation, because that's how a computer algorithm works. That's how it organizes things and patterns things. Things are cyclical. But you also see, though these things are cyclical, there are minute details that are tweaked, if that makes sense. So we're going to end up looking at that as well. But just somebody remind me if you're interested in that, because that's one that I've forgotten a couple times now. So it says 500 years ago during a hot July in Strasbourg, a strange mania seized people. Hundreds of citizens became compelled to dance uncontrollably in the streets for no apparent reason. Now, again, we did look up what was happening around this time, and it was a time of high stress and high tension, which that might end up out this video. We'll check the date and see what happened on this date, such and such, and see like what's going on there. Okay, so the collective dance fever lasts for weeks. That is until they collapse from exhaustion, unconsciousness, or in some cases, even death. Only carting the victims off. Now, this is why he's probably attributed to this because he was no longer alive, obviously. Only carting, I think, 303. Yeah, they died in 303, and this is 1518. So this is a long time later, okay? Only carting the victims off to the nearby St. Vitus Grotto shrine appears to have ultimately halted it. Now, what else did we read is there too? A spring, water, and water is what? Water is life. Water is what? Water is healing because water is life. So it could also have something to do with the water that is there. This bizarre event came to be known as the Dancing Plague or St. Vitus dance. It remains a puzzling and mysterious episode in European history, but what caused it? And I'm going to tell you my opinion here, and I don't know in this time what caused it, but this is what, and I didn't read a lot about this. Like, I'm not well read when it comes to history, at least not since high school. And so when I first saw it, and I didn't have TikTok, I have a small TikTok account now. It's basically just to look at certain things, but I don't scroll it. I don't do any of that stuff. I really don't even look at videos on there. It's really just if people share something and I want to know more about that because all you see is clips and the compilations. And I still haven't even really done that with it yet. But I didn't have TikTok when 2019 and Rona hit. But it's very strange that the years leading up to that, even my boys, because the younger generations are very steeped in this stuff. And whether you want to believe it or not, don't deceive yourself. Your children know what's going on. Some of them, a lot of them. Anyways, they were doing all these dances like the dap and like this. And like, then all of a sudden you just see everybody doing everybody sitting in a room with like pool toys on and stuff, a real small room. They'd be in a classroom. And then suddenly you see them all going nuts with that stuff. When I first saw the TikTok videos and you saw everybody dressed up as nurses and doctors, I was like, okay, is that actual nurses and doctors that are dancing? Or are they just faking us out? Because they're dancing really well. And if nurses are doing this, why are they taking time out of their day to learn choreographed dancing? Do you see? And so I was like, wow, this really reminds me of that dancing plague thing because you can't see their faces, right? Everybody had the mask on. And how creepy it would have been if it would have been like the movie Smile where everybody was just like that or like because they couldn't help themselves. And that's all I could think of is it's like a plague. It seems like a dancing plague. And I didn't know what else to think at the time because if you remove yourself from things like cable TV and media, I haven't had cable TV in many, many years. Everything I watch, I choose to watch. It's not something that's kind of shoved down my throat. When that one show I was watching, Southern Dixie or whatever, in like 2014, when it suddenly turned into a musical out of nowhere, I was like, okay, I'm done with even new sitcoms. And I think I watched that on Netflix. So this is the first thing that I thought of. What do you like to this day? Do you guys think that was dancers and that was all a setup? Or was it actually doctors and nurses out there dancing like that? And if it was doctors and nurses, is that why there's a shortage of them now? Have they like been changed somehow? Did something happen in that field to those people? We're having a lot of things coalesce here. So it says only carting them off to that grotto cured their fever, their dance fever. And I think that's why that term came around, dance fever, Saturday night fever, because their blood, they would call it hot blood, which is weird, but whatever. This bizarre event came to be known as the Dancing Plague or St. Vitus Plague, but what caused it? It says it all started on July 14th in 1518, Strasbourg, then a part of the Holy Roman Empire, which today is France. It sits picturesquely on the River Rhine, a woman named Frau Truffaut. Now, I read a little bit about Frau because I was trying to figure out who she was or what she was before this, like a little more about her life. And you see feminists like praising her, saying that she did it because she was an oppressed housewife. And I don't know if I agree with that. Again, if you get somebody who's influential, like Lady Gaga, like I was talking about in the video prior to this, it could set off another dancing plague because you get that song stuck in your head and then you're singing the song all the time. Then you're wanting to do the dance. Then you're wanting to put it on TikTok. And then you are you're participating in this type of spell. Now, I don't mean you can't enjoy dance. Like I said the other day, there's definitely a place for the arts. We need that as human beings. But we need to use our influence over each other, or at least try not to influence each other maybe so much. Seems to be like the problem is in the screens, it's in the media. If we go watch each other perform, that's one thing, right? And then you go home. But bringing these things, this entertainment into our home, doesn't seem like it was such a great idea in most cases. So Frau Truffaut left her home, went into the street, and suddenly began to dance. It was her and her daughter, from what I read. It says this wasn't a proper court dance or even an informal country dance. She was spinning, twisting, and hopping, all without any music. Passerby thought it at first amusing or curious, while others shaking their heads in disapproval. They summoned her husband, Herr Truffaut, and even he cannot get her to stop. Neighbors slowly came to realize this is a woman. This is a woman will not. Okay, typo. Neighbors came to realize that this is a woman who will not or cannot stop. She continued to dance all day until she collapsed from exhaustion. But then, after resting for a short while on the warm cobblestones, she got up again and resumed her frenzied dance. When asked why she dances, Frau Truffaut makes no eye contact and does not respond. Okay, that's weird because I was wondering, can these people talk? Can they tell you, like, hey, I'm in pain, something hurts, and it's making me do this jig? Like, what's going on here? Neighbors slowly came to realize, oh, okay, sorry. By the third day, a crowd of spectators had gathered vendors, porters, pilgrims, nuns, and children. Could you imagine? We are such a strange species. They were all watching the bizarre spectacle. Her confused husband had to pour water down her dancing throat. She dances for well, now that's love if he kept trying to keep her, alive. She dances for nearly a week on now swollen feet, pausing occasionally only due to exhaustion. 6 days later, Frau Truffaut was still going strong. She hadn't eaten and barely slept. Day or night, rain or shine, she couldn't seem to stop dancing. That is crazy. At this point, the suspicious priests in Strasbourg were convinced she was cursed. They sent her and her husband in a wagon 30 miles away into the mountains of Saverne. So is she dancing the jig in the wagon too? I mean, I'm not trying to be rude, but I got questions. If he's got to feed her water, how in Hades heck are you getting her onto a wagon? I would rather get a granite statue onto a wagon than a woman doing a jig who is doing it uncontrolled. Like, that's just, how would you do that? Okay, so they left. There they hoped she might be cured at the grotto shrine of Saint Vitus. They believed it was he who had cursed her, as Saint Vitus was the patron saint of dancers. Okay, now again, this comes in that he is already. See, I thought maybe it was because of this and because they went to the grotto that they made him the saint of dancing. Why is he already the saint of dancers? Why is that not explained anywhere? If any of you are interested enough to look and you find out the answer, please do share it with the class. It says, but then some of those who had watched her strange, uncontrollable dance began to dance as well. And this is what I'm talking about with the video. And I don't think people understand this. Like, especially now, it's almost as if God has taken off his hands and he's like, okay, you want to control your own destiny? You want to manifest things? It's like he's giving us that. And our minds are very powerful. Like they are the original quantum computer. So if you're watching somebody who has a stronger will than your own, right? And you're already sucked into the machine, so to speak, right? You're into the music videos, you're into the AMAs and the VMAs, and like that's all you feed yourself. Is this a possibility then if you're weak-willed, can just watching, say, a Lady Gaga video over and over make something like this happen? I don't know, but I think it's definitely an interesting line of thought. Let's continue. It says, some of those who had watched began to dance as well, but like her, they cannot explain themselves. They dance as if compelled, with limbs waving. Within a week, 34 people in Strasbourg were afflicted and dancing in the streets. Wow, that gives a new meaning to that song, Dancing in the Streets from the 80s. The dancing plague had spread quickly throughout the city, affecting people from all walks of life, men and women, young and old, rich and poor. All were seized by the uncontrollable urge to dance. That is so strange. Out of all the things, the exact symptoms of the dancing plague varied from person to person. Some dancers drooled, others screamed, while still others laughed uncontrollably. Some danced alone, while others formed groups and danced in clusters. The dancers' feet eventually bled from overuse. I don't mean to laugh at inappropriate times, but even now, with how wild and strange things are, like, I don't know what else to do. I don't know if I have many tears left myself. I just, it's wild to me. Their shoes were worn to shreds. The dancing was not limited to daylight, but continued into the night. Okay, I got questions. They're obviously not eating. But eventually, like when you first start, eventually you're going to hit a point where you have to go to the bathroom. So what's going on here? Like, I got questions. How do you handle this? Okay, this is when shock and alarm began to spread throughout Strasbourg. Gee, you think? See, oh, Vitus. Okay, I was thinking that was a T saying Titus. My bad. The more citizens that became afflicted, the more desperate the Privy Council became. The clergy insisted it had to be the work of a vengeful Saint Vitus. Vitus. Italy. Maybe it's Saint Vitus. I think it's Saint Vitus. That makes more sense. The guide of physicians declared the dance to be a disease caused by, quote unquote, overheated blood. I've actually felt that way sometimes when a lot of this stuff started happening, like spiritually speaking. There were just moments when I was just like, I felt like my blood was on fire. I don't know how to explain it. And I don't, it was before Rona started. It was when everything was kind of climaxing. Wow. Because things start in the spirit first, and some of us are very sensitive to spiritual things. It says, in the hopes of wearing the dancers out, the city council had a stage. So why not? Let's just make a party of it. The city council had a stage built in the town square and grain market and hired musicians to play. At least it wouldn't look as bad, I guess, then at that point. Their theory was that the dancers could only be cured by dancing it out. So there again, you have the hair of the dog, right? What's the first thing they tell you if you have a hangover? Have a Bloody Mary. Now, don't drink them into oblivion again, but one Bloody Mary will oftentimes cure you, right, of the headache and all the things that you're feeling. This is the idea when they give you a certain injectable for a certain thing. If they give a little to you, then you will develop an immunity. I'm not sure how much I agree with that. I agree with it on a spiritual level. Like, I think my parents kind of fear-proofed me by showing me so many scary movies as a child. There's not much today that really frightens me. I think that's a good thing for the time that we're in. So it says they threw a party and they thought maybe if they danced it out, it would stop. So soon the rhythm of lutes, fiddles, pipes, horns, and drums filled the streets. This is wild. It reminds me of the Pied Piper. But when he played, it was only the children that were let out of town. But it was almost like that ended up being a moral lesson. It was a punishment to the parents for mistreating the children, I think. I'm not as well read on that. It backfired horribly. Wow. Okay, so it didn't work. The hair of the dog did not work in this case. The music only induced more citizens to uncontrollably join the crazed dancers. Some of the onlookers must have saw something compelling in the frenzied dancing, something that lured them into a similar mania. Wow, that's wild. By the time August came, there were 400 dancers. That's a month. A month later. By the time August came, there were 400 dancers with no end in sight. As the hot summer sun beat down on their sweating faces, they continued to hop from leg to leg, spin in circles, flail their arms, and whoop loudly. Their eyes are glassy and distant, so they're in a trance. Blood seeps from swollen feet into leather boots and shoes. Now, there is something to be said for suffering. Oftentimes, they say that when you physically suffer, you are given some type of spiritual gift. That is the idea from the story, the Norse story of the god Odin. As far as I understand, we're going to look into this more, but as far as I understand, Odin was a willing sacrifice like Christ. Their stories are very similar, but whereas Odin did it, and he did it to with the extreme purpose of attaining spiritual wisdom and bringing it back to people. There's also a movie from the late 90s. We used to own it, I think, with Dee Snider in it. If you're not into gore, don't look it up. But they would do this thing in this movie. It was called Hanging. I'm not going to explain anymore, but the idea was that you get this, you go through, you hit a wall when you're in so much pain. You hit this wall where it does something spiritually to you. And some people just straight up leave their bodies, which I don't recommend that either. And again, this is the theory behind it, is you will get these blessings, right? So it reminds me kind of that, almost like back in the day when monks would flog themselves because they feel like they deserved it because they were that unworthy. But at the same time, they felt it brought them closer to God. I'm not condoning that or promoting it. I'm just telling you, giving you the information. It says dozens now began to drop like flies, overwhelmed by exhaustion. The lucky ones merely lost consciousness. Many literally danced themselves to death, dying of heart attacks, just like that line in scripture. It says, in the end days, men's hearts will fail them. Many literally danced themselves to death. It says some sources claim the dancing was killing up to 15 people a day. Add that into just regular, everyday things. Okay, let's see. It says the Privy Council ordered the stages to be torn apart. They then prohibited all dance and music in the city for the rest of the summer. And that is the concept behind the movie with Kevin Bacon from the 80s, Footloose. He moves to a town where dancing has been outlawed. They think that it is all wicked and it leads to wickedness and lascivious behavior, which there is a case to be made for that in a sense. But in another sense, again, this is how people show their joy. I think it was Elijah who was basically, he danced. He was a visual prophet. We're going to get into the prophets too. That is the series that we are going to continue, All the King's Men, because we're not just going to look at biblical prophets. We're going to look at prophets from Norse cosmology or culture. And I forget what else we had said. There was somebody else, another group. It says So the Privy Council ordered the stages be torn apart. They prohibited dance and music for the rest of the summer. Finally, the council agreed with the clergy. They ordered those worst afflicted to be taken by wagons on the 3-day ride to the grotto shrine of St. Vitus. So hold up. Are they just like tossing them in the back of the wagons and they're just like still jerking around? Are they waiting for them to pass out of exhaustion? And who gets to go? Why are people dying? If they know that one person was cured, why didn't they send everybody there? I got questions, man. This is weird. This is a strange one. It says Frau Truffaut was still at the shrine and had apparently been cured, so she didn't leave there. At the grotto, priests placed the thrashing dancers before a wooden carving of Saint Vitus. Vitus, Vitus, Vitus. I'm pretty sure it's Vitus. They put red shoes, and now here's where the red shoes come from. Now, other YouTubers will tell you that the red shoes are because they eat people and it's cannibalism. Can we look at the actual reason why people wear the red shoes and where that came from? I know the other story is more exciting, but I wear red shoes sometimes. I like my red Chucks, and I'm just tired of people thinking I'm part of some club. So can we find the real reason out? And people left because of that. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear any truth. This person says, I like to say I don't watch horror movies because I see the news every day. True story. And I watch this sort of stuff, so that's horrific enough. Thanks. I don't know if I should be insulted. Anyways, here we go. Thank you for commenting. Okay, so here's what they did at the grotto. The priest placed the thrashing dancers before a wooden carving of St. Vitus. They put red shoes on their feet, sprinkled holy water on them. The red is to represent Christ's blood. When you see a Christian or a Catholic wearing red shoes or red on the time of on the liturgical calendar around Christmas, what we're actually doing that for is the blood of Christ. It is to remind us that we are here at the sacrifice of another. And for me personally, it reminds me what humanity is capable of and keeps me from following those like more animalistic mob mentality urges. I can't speak for anyone else. That's me. Okay, so it says they sprinkled holy water on them and painted their heads with crosses of consecrated oil. The ritual, carried out in a darkened grotto, thick with incense and slow droning Latin prayers, had the desired effect in stopping the dancing. A grotto, just so you're aware, is kind of a cave, guys. So here we get into more of us liking caves and underground places. Wild. Oftentimes, though, grottos and caves like that, like we read earlier, that is where the well springs up. That is where you have fresh, pure, virginal, if I may, water that's bubbling up from a stream. And I think that has a lot to do with why people are being healed as well. Just my opinion. When word reached Strasbourg, more and more were sent to Saverne to be forgiven by St. Vitus. Within a week, the stream of suffering pilgrims was complete. The dancing plague had lasted for over a month, from mid-July to late August. Once roused, some dancers claimed that they were cured by the chants, while others said it was St. Vitus' curse. The dancing plague was not limited to Strasbourg, but spread to other cities. That's interesting, including Basel and Frankfurt. In some places, it lasted for several months, and in others, it died out quickly. I'd be curious as to like if any of the first people who were afflicted in Strasbourg had traveled to Basel or Frankfurt. And obviously, they didn't have televisions. Word of mouth. You ever see old people sit around in a circle? Like I've worked at old folks' homes, so I like nursing homes, so I know how they, function. And they'll sit around and they'll talk about their ailments. And the next thing you know, everybody in the group has the same ailment. Or these two have to go in the hospital because they now have the same ailment that this one had. Our words have power, guys. And most people won't tell you that, but they really do. If you care about each other, stop talking about certain things. That way, you're not passing that along to that person. You might think, well, I'm just venting or I'm just bringing awareness. But in some cases, you are putting a yoke on that person. You are, in, for lack of a better word, you're covering them in a type of spell, a word spell. So just be careful what you say to each other, especially in this time. So it says, in some places it lasted for several months, and in others it died out quickly. Historians have estimated the total number of dancers to be in the thousands. The final death toll was likely in the hundreds. So once again, they don't know how many passed away. Strasbourg was not the first dancing plague to hit medieval Europe. All right, now, why? What do you mean? More than 10 such events had broken out along the Rhine River. Again, you're near water. Could it have been a toxin? But it's a river. Most people aren't drinking out of the river. Well, maybe back then. It makes me wonder, like, what's growing by the river? What is getting in the water? What is happening at this point? It says in 1237, a group of children from Erfurt danced 20 kilometers or 12 miles to the neighboring town before collapsing in exhaustion. In 1374, thousands of villagers along the Rhine fell into a dancing mania, screaming in agony as the pain increased. Up until the 15th century, nuns from different convents. Okay, I'm not sure what this has to do with the dancing plague, but it's in here, so I'll read it. Up until the 15th century, nuns from different convents would climb trees and meow like cats. That is weird. As they were smaller in number than Strasbourg, they were interpreted in their day as either demonic possession, or divine punishment. Interesting. In the 500 years since, many theories have been offered as an explanation. Yes, I'm fat. Like, why that river? What's going on near that river? And you also know, if you've ever watched any paranormal shows like I did back in the day, that a lot of these things take place near water, right? Now, is it because the fallen are in water? Now, if you ask me, water has a current, right? This is how we talk. We know that moving water has a current. What else has a current? Frequency. So you could conceivably have some type of spirits move along the water just like they do at different frequencies in the airwaves. Just a thought. Okay, so it says just 8 years later, the famous physician Paracelsus visited Strasbourg. He investigated what he called the choreomania, and wrote a treatise on the diseases that deprive man of his reason. All like the deaf, dumb, and blind spirit that we see Jesus talk to the disciples about in Scripture. Best known for his pioneering work in medicinal chemistry, Paracelsus suggested that a person's laughing veins could provoke an intense ticklish feeling. This would cloud judgment and provoke extreme emotions until the frenzied blood was finally calmed. The Strasbourg poor were perhaps primed for an epidemic of hysterical dancing. See, now they're going to explain exactly what was going on in this time. This is a little gem we found here. There had been a succession of poor harvests resulting in high grain prices, political instability, not to mention epidemics of syphilis and leprosy. This stress could have manifested as hysterical dancing. But why? Because the citizens believed it could. Aha, here we get into the placebo or nocebo effect, the power of compulsion, which again, if somebody else is doing this from the outside, this is what they would call back then witchcraft. People were suggestible, and a firm belief in the St. Vitus curse was enough to set them off. Interesting. So if they see the one person dancing, not realizing she has epilepsy or what's going on there, they could say, oh my, it's a curse. And because they believe it, then it's happening to them. And we've talked about that as far as Rona goes. Be very, very careful on this day. Okay, it says in the popular Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, The Red Shoes. I might actually have that. And I could read it to you guys. The cursed pair of beautiful scarlet leather slippers condemned their owner into a dance as a punishment for her vanity. It is so convoluted that she eventually finds an executioner to hack off her own feet. Holy cow. That reminds me, there's a Christmas story. I think, God, I'm going to show my age here. I think Rob Lowe was in the Christmas movie back when Lifetime actually showed decent Christmas. Well, did they ever show decent Christmas movies? I don't know. But there's this story called The Red Shoes. There's a song, a country song too, I think, or a Christmas song called The Red Shoes. It's actually a very sweet story. Now it says dancing due to tarantism was also a common theory at the time, as it was believed to be caused by the bite of a large tarantula wolf spider. Its symptoms included convulsion, sweating, and a frenzied desire to move. The cure for tarantism was said to be, you guessed it, music and dancing. Here are some modern theories. Modern historians argued that the dancing plagues could have been caused by ergo, a mind-altering mold found on damp rye. They have blamed that on several events of a similar time period, if I'm not mistaken, because I've listened to a lot of spooky stories and all that type of thing in my day. And yeah, this is not the only case in where you'll find that's brought up. It says when inadvertently baked. Oh gosh. Hang on, guys. I want to finish this article for you. So let me plug my laptop in real quick because it's wanting to die. I apologize. It happens. I'm not a fancy girl with a fancy studio. But I'm glad you're here with me. Those of you who decide to spend some time with us. All right, there we go. That's better. Okay, I'm back. Okay, modern historians argued that the dancing plague could have been caused by ergo, a mind altering mold found on damp rye. When inadvertently baked into bread and eaten, it can cause twitching, jerking, and hallucinations similar to LSD. Ergoism, do you pronounce the T when you add the ism? I don't know. Was common in Europe in the 16th century. However, when ergo can cause convulsion, like, however, while ergo can cause convulsions, it also restricts blood flow to the extremities. Someone poisoned by it would most likely die and not be able to dance for days on end. All my disclaimers, by the way, are in the description box. Some characterize choreomania as a psychic epidemic. See, I kind of agree with this. I kind of feel like it's a placebo effect. It's a monkey see, monkey do thing. I still believe it could have been caused by the desire to manipulate, the desire, witchcraft in that way. But I believe that it seems like it passed along by people who saw it and then like were afraid, oh no, I can get this. And to me, that's what it seems like. But I wasn't there, so I don't know. Psychologists stated that it belongs to a class called stronghold there. We know that there are a whole lot of people in the psychiatry industry who are practicing the craft. That in some cases, that is what it is, especially hypnotism. Anytime you try to manipulate somebody else's free will with, yeah, consent is void. It doesn't count. Okay. Keep these things in mind as you move through these times we're in, because you're going to start to feel the squeeze more. Everybody is. Whether we want to be categorized or not, we're getting put into like nature's algorithm, God's algorithm, the creator's algorithm. And so we're being tested to see where we fit, I guess, or where we want to. Okay. So, yeah, they say the mass hysteria is a condition in which a group of people share a common delusion or anxiety. It suggests that dancers were caught up in a kind of trance. I would agree with that, with how they weren't answering questions, were drooling, and that their frenzied behavior was a result of their collective belief in the need to dance. And see, if it was a spider bite or something like that, these people, from what we've read anyways, and in these few things we've seen, they're not exhibiting any other symptoms. The symptom is the dance, and then other things happen to them because they're on their feet all day, right? You have exhaustion coming into play. You have swollen feet, bloody feet. You have probably hunger, dehydration. So you have all these other things once they get into dancing that are then they're acquiring symptoms, right? But up until then, as far as we've read, there's no symptom beforehand. It's then a type of psychic contagion. I think that's what it is. Similar to the the laughing epidemic that engulfed Tanzania as recently as 1963, when a couple of girls at a local mission school began to giggle, their friends followed suit until two-thirds of the pupils were laughing and crying uncontrollably. Once home, the pupils infected their families, and soon whole villages were consumed by hysterics. Gosh, I can see me being a part of one of these though, because I'm one of those people. I don't know about you, but like I said, we're at a time now where everything is just climaxing, and I don't know what else to do but laugh. Like some of this is so far out of my scope of reason of what I thought life was. I don't know if you agree, but once home, the peoples infected their families, and soon whole villages were consumed by hysterics. Doctors recorded several hundred cases lasting a week on average. The epidemic lasted 18 months. In ethnic cultures, people enter trances deliberately during various ceremonies. That's what that Dee Snider movie was kind of about, that I was talking about before, and about in Norse theology, the sacrifice of Odin. It says once in trance, their perception of pain is known to be marginalized. Of course, dancing plagues do have a modern parallel. Raves. Here, often with the help of alcohol and some colored pills, partygoers go on to dance for days with few breaks, food, or sleep. I mean, that's similar, but they go in there knowing that that's what they want to do. Like they want to dance, they want to let off steam, they want to go buck wild crazy. I know because I've been to a few, and they weren't even like they were very tame. The dancing plague remains one of the most enigmatic episodes in European history. It continues to fascinate scientists and artists alike. The tale makes us pause. A lone figure who sparks a mass movement, in this case a dance, that is so consuming it transcends both one's will and physical abilities. The trouble with mass psychogenic illness is that there's no way to predict when it will happen. I would disagree, especially with the media. If you hear about masking and all this type of stuff, stop watching. I almost guarantee, I'm not a doctor, but stop watching. Chances are you're not going to become infected out of belief. I'm not a doctor, no part of this is medical advice. It says the dancing plague is a powerful example of how people can become caught up in a shared delusion, anxiety, or fear, and how such mass hysteria can lead to tragic consequences even today. There's something intrinsically unsettling when the fabric of society suddenly breaks down, replaced with inexplicable behavior leading to chaos. St. Vitus' dance reminds us of the fragility of our own society and of the strength of shared delusions. One only has to think back to Nazi Germany or the Jonestown Massacre to realize the power of mass hysteria. And I would go one further on some of that. All right, so the last thing, if you will permit me to do, just out of curiosity, I want to look at the date July 14th, because that's when it started. That's also when the Bastille was stormed. So I'm just curious about what has gone on in history on that date, 7/14, somebody's favorite number that I know very well. Key historical events on July 14th include the storming of the Bastille in 1789. So that was a couple hundred years after the dancing plague. And I don't even see the dancing plague listed here yet. Okay, we began the French Revolution, the passage of the Sedition Act in the U.S. in 1798, the killing of the outlaw Billy the Kid in 1881, the Nice terrorist attack in 2016 during the Bastille Day celebrations. Other notable events include the discovery of a Vincent van Gogh self-portrait in 2022. Wow, I missed that. I'm going to have to look that up. Wow, that's big. Excuse me. In 1798, the U.S. Congress passed the Sedition Act, making it a federal crime to publish false or malicious statements against the U.S. government. Huh. It's interesting that we took a look at this because the way things usually work in my life, I'm sorry, my allergies are starting to really get me again. I'm going to have to take an allergy pill. I apologize. And I'll turn into SpongeBob. It's either I've got too much going on or not enough. Okay. So what I was going to say is that it's interesting we stumbled upon that today because we have seen on this channel, at least, when we look at something, there's usually a reason we're led to it. So keep that in mind. It's interesting that they don't really seem to make use of that, or at least not publicly. So we see Billy the Kid was killed. NASA's Mariner 4 became the first space probe to fly by Mars. 2016, the terrorist attack in Nice. Notable birthdays and deaths. 1912, Woody Guthrie was born. Gerald Ford was born. And Swedish film director Ingmar Bergman was born. Ingrid must be his wife, right? Or daughter. Is she old enough to be his daughter? European allies retook Tientsin, China from the rebelling Boxers, 1933. Not Germany, all political parties except the Nazi Party were outlawed. Interesting. That was in 33, guys. Check that out. My how time is cyclical because I can definitely see what's happening right now. Trump is doing exactly what he said he wouldn't do. He's putting all his political opponents in jail. You're not supposed to be allowed to do that. You can't just jail people who disagree with you. 1958, a military coup in Iraq led by a name I'm not going to pronounce overthrew the monarchy, resulting in the assassination of the king. Jane Goodall began her groundbreaking chimpanzee studies. I'm not really seeing a whole lot, though, on this day. We'll just bring this up for the fun of it here at the end of this video. All right, historical events on July 14th. King Otto II and his Frankish army defeated in a pitched battle. Hello? All right, cool. So I just wanted to come back in. We're basically done with this video. So what we're going to do next is, maybe not the next video, but we're going to look at Old Testament prophets. We're going to look at Norse, their prophecies, because those were pretty interesting. But each one is going to get its own video. So we'll look at the Norse theology and its prophetic or prophets, okay? The series is called All the King's Men. So it will be prophets from each culture, which is the goal anyways. And the goal is also to show us what they all have in common. Thank you so much for being here. There were a couple other videos that I have on the back burners. I will post an update over on the community tab. Thank you guys so much for being here. You have a blessed day. And please do leave your comments and anything you're interested in taking a look at, especially the things that spring forward from topics we've already covered. That'd be cool too. All right, you guys have a blessed day. Thanks for being here. Bye.